It is Friday, September 13th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another expensive episode of LTPS. It's been a very turbulent few weeks for PlayStation. There's a lot going on, obviously. We've got Concord, then Astro Bot, then PS5 Pro, so a lot to go over, of course, but as always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. So the PS Plus Essential September lineup is still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those games. And also, we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium September lineup announced as well, going live on the 17th. So for PS Plus Extra, the big headline title here is, of course, the Plucky Squire, launching day one into PS Plus Extra, and that game still does look incredibly unique and interesting, and that is absolutely the kind of stuff where I like seeing that launch day one into PS Plus Extra. Elsewhere on the lineup, you have Road 96, Ben 10, Far Cry 5. Really, for me, I would recommend Night in the Woods. I love that game a lot. It's one of those more cozy style weekend games, and while I don't live in a small town, it has those kind of vibes where I feel like it probably captures that essence very well, and also the protagonist is a cat, and that's something I can really get behind. So Night in the Woods, I love that game a lot. Going into PS Plus Premium, though, my God, it's still only 3-4 games every month, but I'm telling you, this is getting so much better. Pistol Whip, PSVR 2, so still having some PSVR 2 games on there, nice to see that. Secret Agent Clank on PSP, we had a feeling that was going to come fairly soon, but for PS2, Sky Gunner, PlayStation 2, the Atlas sort of, that's like a flight game, and then Mr. Mosquito on PlayStation 2 as well. Both of those PS2 games, I don't know if niche is the right word here, but they're certainly a little bit more obscure and unique, and they're the kind of games where it's like, I was not expecting we would get those, but my God, I love it. Let's do more of that stuff, especially because they are like a lesser known, they're not the kind of games that a lot of people had the chance to, try out and play, and they're very quirky. I mean, Mr. Mosquito is just that. You're a goddamn mosquito flying around, biting people, and it's super cool. Now, we never got the sequel in the West, but it's still nice to have that. And then Sky Gunner 2, I think that did not ship in Europe. In that game, well, alongside Mr. Mosquito, the physical prints are, they hold their value really well. They're like more than $60+, I think, near 100 or so. So this is always the kind of stuff that I really appreciate with revisiting and restoring classics on modern hardware. So, I mean, I'm not going to front. It's still like a very slow output for classics, but I mean, PlayStation 2, I think, is kind of out of the gate pretty strong here with the sort of stuff that I really was not expecting. Mr. Mosquito, that is so cool, and that's a game I was almost going to buy recently as well. And now it's great to have it on PlayStation 4 and 5 with rewind, save states, video presets, and I do hope that one gets trophies either day one or at some point, which, again, Implicit Conversions has been pretty good with doing that even with third-party games nowadays. But moving on to our first news story, we have the latest PS5 system software update now live on PSN, version 10.0, a big one, which this one, interesting enough, it was something where during the beta phase, there really wasn't a whole lot there. That was where the primary changes were the custom 3D audio profiles, which is nice, obviously, the adaptive charging for PS5 Slim models, and now also confirmed for upcoming PS5 Pro models, being able to restore licenses on a per user basis, or enabling remote play on a per user basis. But this is also the firmware that does include the upcoming big change for the Explore icon, where US consoles have the Explore icon, but that's going to change to the Welcome Hub, which is essentially what they were testing previously. So it's a customizable page with various widgets you can move around and resize and really tailor that to your liking. And the big news here is that, yes, it is going to come to every console worldwide, so it will not just be strictly for US PlayStation 5 owners. Now, the big caveat with this, I'm seeing a lot of people wonder, why is this not actually out yet? Because you've probably already updated your console and you don't have this just yet. This was confirmed on the PlayStation blog and also via the firmware patch notes that it is going to roll out gradually. So only a select few people in the US actually got the Explore icon, or rather the Welcome Hub it's now called, and it's going to roll out slowly to those in Japan, then select countries in Europe, and then everybody should have it in about 1 to 2 months. So It is kind of a pain, obviously, because with a lot of stuff lately during the PlayStation 5 cycle, Sony's been doing just this, whether it's like server-side updates, firmware updates, features that, are either on PlayStation.com or the mobile app. They always use this language now of rolling it out slowly, so it's just something they've been doing a lot lately. So it's a pain, but just be patient, because it does appear as though they are going to give this thing to everybody, which that was the one question mark we had with this entire thing when I was in the beta phase for the Explorer changes, which that was also separate from the actual PS5 beta firmware, which I always was trying to tell people those two were technically separate. One was server side, and then the beta codes were still normal with the 3D audio profiles and things like that. So, but it's nice that that is actually married together, and it's going to be coming out very soon. So, with the Explorer thing being primarily a server-side change, you're just going to log into PS5 one day, and it's just going to show up. So you now have the latest firmware, your console is prepped for getting widgets, and you just have to wait it out, and it's great to see that it does look the way that it does, because it's a very useful feature. This is probably the one aspect of the console UI where we can all agree this is a very welcomed, great change. Now, there is one thing that was a little strange about this firmware, and that's over on the PlayStation blog, where Sony always does the separate write-up talking about what's in the firmware, how it's going out later today. They'll always show official screenshots, and so one of those screenshots for the Welcome Hub, if you zoom in on the battery widget, you can see the PSVR 2 headset as an icon with its own battery indicator. Now, that's a little weird because PSVR 2 is not a wireless headset, and we do know that for the PSVR 2 Sense controllers, those have their own unique icons for the left and right, showing the battery status for those controllers, because that would obviously make sense. You can't consolidate those into one icon. It's not that. In fact, I can confirm that's how it worked back during the Explorer beta phase, which I don't actually have the updated Welcome Hub just yet, but I can't imagine that's not going to, that's going to change, obviously. So it seems like a little mishap here, because Sony already did change out the picture, so now it does show simply two generic controller icons, and then also the Pulse Explorer on there as well. So definitely a little bit of a mistake, but I guess it does pose the question of what went on with the original picture, because I will play devil's advocate here in that obviously some would look at this and go, okay, it's clearly just a little mess up from the social media team that drafted up that picture. But the problem is the picture still is usually sourced from like the team that works on the UI. It's either captured on real hardware or just sort of in a virtual machine or something, and they send over a screenshot. And from that point forward, the team might maybe dress it up or make changes. So that's where there's some plausibility on maybe they forgot to take that out, or the UI team forgot to take it out, or maybe it was something where they only had like one example in the battery widget from the UI team, then the social media team stepped in and added something after the fact, right? So it's just a little bit weird there. Although I would probably venture a guess and say we're not actually going to get this sort of updated revision for PSVR 2 where it's like truly wireless. Now, I would say it's a possibility, but I just certainly was not expecting that. PSVR 1 had a very slight model revision about a year and a half, 2 years in. That's where the breakout box could then finally accept HDR pass-through, and then the actual headset itself had integrated headphones as well. So it's like a very soft revision. This I would consider much more substantial. So while some are hoping that PSVR 2, with it even doing as bad as it is doing, that the company would maybe sort of introduce an updated version at the same price point, or maybe, God forbid, it's a little bit higher. But I think it's there's a chance that's happening, but I would say maybe not. Just I would say there's some plausibility here on maybe that actually was a genuine mistake, but we'll keep watching this and see what develops. All right, let's move on to some Astro Bot news. Of course, the game came out last week, so we've seen a lot of things pop up with new interviews and some sales data. So let's mention the one thing, which is the VIP bots in the game, because there is like 170 of them. A lot of them, of course, being deeply integrated from PlayStation history. And so recently, Team Asobi's creative director, Nicolas Duché, was speaking on the PlayStation blog and gave us some insight into how easy it was to get those bots into the game. So he said, and I quote here, "Since this title packs in much of PlayStation history, we worked closely with all the PlayStation studios. When we shared our concept with the studio directors and game creators, their responses were overwhelmingly positive. Initially, I thought we could only feature around 50 characters out of the 150 characters we wanted to feature, but to our greatest surprise, the studios unanimously agreed to the cameo of all 150 characters. Apart from our PlayStation studios, we were also lucky to collaborate with third-party publishers." Yes, there are indeed a lot of characters in there, some that I was very surprised by, and it is one of those things where, I kind of harken back to like something as funny as, and you might remember this, which was in The Last of Us Part 2, where, and this was during the state of play, so it's not like a spoiler or anything, but it was a matter of like, there's a PlayStation Vita in the game, like one of the characters is playing a PS Vita, then Ellie comes in and like, stabs the shit out of him. But I remember Neil Druckmann talking about how it was actually very hard to get that cleared. Like, you would think, okay, it's a PlayStation studio, are they allowed to use PlayStation products? And he said it was actually a lot more difficult to actually get that cleared than one would think. So in the case of something like Astro Bot, even though they're all internally owned IP, it's cool knowing that there was a bit of outreach and talking with the studio directors and things, giving them some concepts of what the bots would look like, maybe looking for a feedback loop on, is it okay if we include them and to make them look like this or whatever. And it's very cool that out of 150, they damn near got everything in there. And there are so many. Still working on my, I finished the game obviously, but working on more of a supercut similar to what I did for Astro's Playroom. I wanted to try and get that up this past week, but that just clearly was not going to happen, especially with the PS5 Pro stuff going on. That should be up next week, so you'll see my genuine reaction to all the VIP bots and a lot of the big moments in the game. But it was very cool to know that they had a lot of this unanimous support coming from the internal studios. Now, something else we should also mention for those VIP bots is that we might end up seeing more of them by way of the already confirmed upcoming speedrun and challenge DLC, which now that we have the base game and we know the sort of basic structure, which not quite a spoiler, I'm not going to show or talk about anything in particular, but there are those gauntlet style levels which are challenging and they can have a speedrun feel to it, and so we're going to get more of those, but those are laid out in a way where there's always one VIP bot per those challenge gauntlets, and so we're probably going to see more of those. And so for the VIP bots, what we saw in the end credits of the game is Team Asobi thanking various publishers and IP that did not end up being in the base game. So again, spoiler if you don't want to hear about these, but it does seem like we might see some VIP bots for the following franchises, that being Assassin's Creed, Beyond Good and Evil, Rayman, Croc, Worms, Stellar Blade, and Rise of the Ronin. I think it did show that they're looking to do about 10 to 5 extra like DLC free levels that they'll end up doing at some point. It sounds like they already got the green light to do these characters, so probably that's what's going to end up happening, which I am all for. I mean, those are some of the funnest moments in the entire game, is those gauntlet style levels. And so not only do I want more of those, but I say really lean into the challenge and make them like punishingly difficult. They're so fun. It's like platforming at its absolute finest. And the VIP bots are like the really fun thing near the end as well, because they're so cool. So maybe we'll see like an Eve bot or a Worm bot, Croc as well. I think those would be super dope. So and not only do I hope that's like that's what we're expecting in this first round of free DLC, but quite frankly, I want more. I just hope that there is more beyond 10 or 15 levels. Okay, moving on to some Astro Bot sales data. We are, of course, going to watch this game very closely and see how well it does, because that would maybe bode well for seeing more Astro or games like it. So we have some early data coming in suggesting the game did, reasonably well, but maybe not outstanding. So from the UK, we have Christopher Dring of GamesIndustry.biz letting us know that UK sales for Astro Bot were initially tracking behind Ratchet & Clank, but the first week sales in total for physical and digital do have it tracking 21% higher. On the flip side, the game did not do all that well in Japan, selling only 12,000 copies at retail. No digital data, but 12,000 still not necessarily great for a PS Studios game. And we can also briefly mention that for the PS5 price increase in Japan, that unsurprisingly made the console sales completely tank, going down from like 37,000 to now like 11,000 or something, so that is not too surprising there. But we do have early indicators so far that the game is doing like okay. It's really hard to judge right now, obviously, especially without having Circana with US sales data, but so far it does seem like the game's doing okay. And that's sort of what I was getting at the entire time, right? I mean, I'll always say, like, I want the game to do millions, gangbusters. I would be very happy, but at the same time, I would be overly cautious and say the one game we can really compare it to is Ratchet, and I just don't really see the game somehow matching Ratchet, or at least not at the same sales pace initially. Astro might have good like long-term legs on the market, especially with how much goodwill the game is generating nowadays with just positive buzz and word of mouth, and so maybe over the holiday season the game is going to do much better, and it's obviously doing good right now anyway, so it is tracking ahead of Ratchet and Clank, which is good. I mean, that's kind of the entire point, right? The thing with Ratchet is that it's an established IP, it's so well known, and it is very appealing in that first year because it is something where for early adopters, even though the PS5 install base is not necessarily all that big, you're still going to have a lot of people in droves go out and buy that game. So it's not like this particular title 3 years later with 60 million PS5s out there has to in turn represent a 3-time improvement over Ratchet and Clank. That's not really how these things work, but it still does show that the game is doing okay. Even good, I would say. The other aspect is that this game doesn't actually have to do like 10 million plus copies right away, right? It's Astro. It's only a 3-year dev cycle, 65-person team, very modest budget relative to everything else that PS Studios is outputting nowadays. So this game, I think, is probably in a very safe territory to earn a profit, and that can be a great stepping stone to having more Astro Bot. You know, it's one of those things where like Rome was not built in a day, and this really was the first time where Astro was able to really be like this was its shot to be proven as an IP, because as we often say, the camera app on PS4, most people did not have the chance to try that or mess around with it, and that's still very much a technical demonstration. PSVR 1, of course, most people didn't play that, and then Playroom on every single PS5, that's good, that's a great starting point. Not everybody even played that, so this is still the first opportunity for Astro to be sold as a standard, you know, retail, digital, $60 game, platformer. Anybody can play this and enjoy it, so you would hope that it is a stepping stone for, you know, another Astro Bot, maybe another one, and then from there the IP and reverence and appreciation for the character can build over time, and that's what I hope for. It doesn't have to necessarily be this knockout success right away, although I still inherently hope that does happen, but so far I'd say we're looking safely good for Astro. Now, before we move on to the very expensive PlayStation 5 Pro, we should also talk about the DualSense controller, because this too saw a very slight but also annoying price increase. So across the board, it's now $5 more, which that would mean $75 controllers are $80, or $70 went up to $75. This showed up on PS Direct and third-party retailers, so it is indeed the actual MSRP for the controllers now, and this also popped up in other markets as well, so not just, say, North America. The controller is more expensive, which is definitely annoying. I mean, this console generation has been very expensive, and Sony is in a place where they are getting to a point where it's very much unchecked behavior. I mean, we always on this channel like to discuss, you know, the business side of things. Why is Sony doing the things that they're doing? It's a matter of like trying to rationalize it from a business point of view, right? And there's certainly many cases where component prices have gone up, and inflation is a very real thing to consider, and you know, COVID changed everything. The supply chain really messed everything up, and so there is very much something that is widespread across the technology sector, which is technology is more expensive. You know, so there's certainly a lot of that at play, but that's not necessarily excusing Sony of anything when they are also a clear market leader, and this might just be also an example of them trying to increase margins when they have the reason, when they have the freeway here to do it, right? They're being unchecked, and they're really trying to, they're not shy in looking for the ceiling on what their customers are willing to pay. Going up to 70 is certainly one thing, right? Like it's going to happen. Controllers were going to go up, games were going to go up. But man, it keeps going up is the problem. So this stings. It's a small price increase, but still one that hurts. All right, moving on to PlayStation 5 Pro. We have some additional details to clear up here from the initial console reveal, which happened on Tuesday. So with the dust now settling on that, there's a number of things that we've learned after the fact. So we'll cover up all that in kind of a, you know, sort of a bullet point list here, because it's all kind of coming from different sources. The one hands-on that we had go live shortly after the reveal was just from CNET. They were the only ones that were able to get some hands-on time with the console. That was Scott Stein of CNET, and so they actually did did show a real-life photo of the console next to a Slim, and that console does show that it is the same width. So despite the language on the PS blog, it does appear as though the existing covers should, in theory, fit on this console. Now, we are hearing that Sony's proprietary AI upscaler, PSSR, is going to apply to the entire library of games, and that includes the thousands of 1080p PS4 games that never saw a PS4 Pro enhancement. And that is also going to apply to PSVR 2 games in the future, and that is the language there, so there's probably going to be a firmware update that's going to enable that down the road, and we're still not hearing of any PSVR 2 games that are going to receive native patches to enhance the experience for those games. Now, the rear of the console does have an extra USB-C port instead of USB-A, so I assume that means one of each instead of two USB-A. And again, this is on the PS blog, but some people are still overlooking this. 2 terabytes of storage and also Wi-Fi 7 included in the console as well. Still definitely a bit polarizing that Sony maybe didn't spend time talking about these sort of enhancements and features for their 9-minute demonstration. But they are confirming that for day one, they're expecting around 40 to 50 games are going to get free native PS5 Pro enhanced patches. These will all mostly focus on 4K 60 FPS upgrades across the board, but enhancements will vary across titles where, we could see new things like volumetric lighting and effects, more on-screen characters, or modes that can now go up to 120 from the base console. The big deal from CNET is that they did get some hands-on time with Gran Turismo 7, which is going to have a playable 8K mode. Likely not 8K native. PSSR is probably coming in to do that, but Polyphony has always historically been the studio that likes to really push the envelope on PlayStation hardware. They do, silly things like 1080p modes, or 1080i, I think it is, on PlayStation 2. PlayStation 3, they have that weird thing where for 5 and 6 you can actually connect 5 PS3 consoles and 5 monitors and get more of a full display for racing. So they always kind of do things like that. So GT7 as a AAA PS5 game, it is going to have an 8K mode. There is also going to be a 4K mode with additional ray tracing effects as well. We're also hearing from Sony, based on data that they have, around a quarter of PS5 owners right now do have a 120Hz enabled TV, and around 1 in 10 owners in total have a VRR enabled TV. The system architect Mark Cerny also provided some quotes here where he dives into more about the hardware and the games and what they're expecting. So he says, and I quote here, "I've already seen games with 3 different PS5 Pro modes. As time goes by, particularly for the games which are launching after the hardware releases, we'll increasingly see a more nuanced approach where the focus is less on resolution and much more about higher image quality through a variety of strategies. PS5 Pro uses the new advanced ray tracing feature sets that AMD created as the next step in their roadmap architecture. But if you look around, there are no other AMD GPUs that use it yet. We motivated the development, and I'm very happy we did so. The response from the developers has been extraordinarily great." Now, Cerny also touched on this new relationship the company is seeing with their PC ports and how the overlap is mutually beneficial. So some of their high-end PC settings for their PC ports might find their way into the PS5 Pro versions. And for the hands-on portion with CNET, Scott Stein did also talk about his experience where a lot of them did feel very subtle, he admits, where he had to visibly look back and forth between the base console and PS5 Pro to really appreciate the differences. But a noteworthy example he did point out is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where the game looked noticeably sharper and smoother, kind of like putting on glasses, and then Gran Turismo 7's 8K mode and the 4K RT mode were also very stunning as well, he said. And we also had John Linneman of Digital Foundry chime in as well, saying he too was very impressed with Rebirth's image quality, and it does sound like maybe they got access to the hardware, so we might see something from Digital Foundry fairly soon, which they are certainly the ones to watch for their insight on how this console is going to perform. Which I guess that's where we can get into this particular portion, right, is the performance of this machine, because I think what is so polarizing about the reveal, and we will absolutely get to price in a second here, but it's a matter of how they did it, right? Now, there's ways they could have, I think, navigated this to where they could maybe soften the blow on that price tag, but in general, I think the consensus here does seem to be that the presentation just was not very good, especially knowing everything that we just went over, which is, why did we not spend time talking about this during the live stream, or rather the YouTube premiere, and now the video on YouTube, which has, more than 1 million something views, but also very likely a lot of dislikes, because it's just, you can see how they tried to go about doing this. I actually called this right before the premiere actually happened, which was they're probably trying to address the problems they've had in recent console reveals, which is being maybe a little bit too long, maybe a little bit too technical, not being consumer facing enough. And so things like Road to PS5, which yes, that was meant to be a GDC talk, but it was still something everybody had their eyes on, and then they watched it and went, what the hell was that? They've done console reveals before for like mainline home systems where they'll spend an hour, 2 hours talking about it with renting out a venue, or it would be E3, and they won't reveal the console or talk about price and things like that, which is historically what they've always done. But it's it sounds like they tried to take all that feedback in and create a very tight show of like 10 minutes. It's very flashy looking, which it was. I mean, you can tell it was very consumer focused, but it still begs the question, why did you not talk about all these other things, which is, the 40 to 50 games that are going to have free patches? Why are you not talking about the 2 terabytes of SSD storage or Wi-Fi 7 or frankly PSSR, where we're now learning that that's going to apply to the entire library of games? That's kind of a big deal. I would actually argue that if PSSR is going to have some very good results for the thousands of 1080p PS4 games that never got a PS4 Pro enhancement, that is a big deal. I mean, if that ends up looking pretty good, it's like, why are you not talking about that during this presentation? It's a very bizarre thing. You're speaking to the most engaged customers that are on paper willing to spend more money to buy this console, and you didn't really do that. And even moreover, you're zooming in on these side-by-side comparisons. Now that's fine. That's not the problem. But it's like, why did you not make that full screen to really highlight the extra detail that those games are going to present, like a Digital Foundry? It's like you can see what they're trying to do, but why did they approach it that way? You're already fighting against YouTube, the YouTube video player and the compression there, because it's never going to look as good as it being right in front of you. So it's just, the whole thing was, not like, the messaging was not very good. There was no shot that they were going to be able to really control the messaging and the narrative surrounding this console, especially by the time the price tag did show up. But in terms of performance, we're already seeing and we're having early indicators that this thing is going to do exactly what it is meant to do on paper. Because we already knew a while ago now at this point that the GPU was the really big sizable increase, and PSSR was now this new in-house proprietary technology that the company would be using for all their games, which we're now learning. But the CPU was going to be the same. They're just clocking it 10% faster, which that too is also a very big story that came out yesterday, where the Digital Foundry guys are feeling very confident in saying now that a very big game like, say, Grand Theft Auto 6 is not going to have a 60 FPS mode on PlayStation 5 Pro, which that in a way is certainly going to be an outlier. There's not nearly as many CPU-bound games as, I guess speaking broadly for the entire library, because the other aspect is that you still don't need the console because it's a very enthusiast machine. The base console has the vast majority of titles on there are 60 FPS, right? But this machine is going to step in, not only potentially clean up some of those slightly unstable 60 FPS games, or the ones that have high frame rate modes that sit around 80, 90. Maybe this console is going to push it up to 120 more reliably, but also having PSSR step in. Or even if PSSR is inactive, there's still the possibility that they can just raise the base resolution of those particular games if it's dynamic. And so there is still a lot of visual upside, but we are still in the landscape of diminishing returns. So it's not like you're seeing this sort of 2 times increase over PS4 to PS4 Pro. This thing is even more incremental, and it does show. But if you are the kind of enthusiast buyer that still wants the best looking games, the most refined experiences, and you still prefer playing on console, which pound for pound, despite the very steep price, you're going to come in under equivalencies on PC. It's just the simple reality. That's the entire point of consoles. Sony will still to this day understand that sort of those optics, which is you can't price this thing too high because then it really does look very unusual. So even at $700 or €800, again, where it gets really obscene in some markets, they do realize that aspect of it. And so there is still, something to be said about the performance of the machine, where it is probably going to deliver some good returns. And it's very bizarre that they were not able to demonstrate that, where we're already hearing that the console is actually pretty good at what it's meant to do, which is be a low volume enthusiast console that only a select few are going to be interested in buying. So now that we've cleaned up all those details, let's go over some pricing discussion, which the one thing we can touch on is the expected sales of PS5 Pro, which I think a lot of us are sitting here wondering how many of these things are they really going to move when they've got it priced the way that they do. So we have some analysis coming in initially from Ampere Analysis. This comes from Piers Harding Rolls, where they did this write-up where they do expect a large majority of sales to come from existing owners that are looking to upgrade. They also believe the price is more reflective of the general supply chain inflation, Sony protecting their margins, and also feeling no pressure from a direct competitor, allowing them to protect those margins. So as for sales, they're forecasting 1.3 million PS5 Pros will be sold for this year compared to the 1.7 million PS4 Pros that were sold during the original 2016 launch window. And so compared to the entire life cycle, they're expecting numbers to be a little bit more similar, where PS4 Pro did around 14.5 million lifetime sales, and they expect PS5 Pro to be around 13 million by 2029. So it would appear as though the console maybe is not going to do as well as PS4 Pro, but maybe similar enough to where that would be surprising to some. I mean, I am curious as to what will end up happening, because this is an analysis. It's not accurate just yet. But with that price tag being so high, I'm wondering, are they going to be able to really match the sales pace that PS4 Pro saw, where that was low volume too? This certainly will be, and it is going to sell. I have no doubt in my mind the pre-orders will probably go up, and they will likely sell out, but that's also highly dependent on the initial allocation. How many consoles are they going to manufacture? But it is still going to move some units, and it's going to do, I think, reasonably well in context of what Sony is looking to get out of this thing, which is making money, obviously, but at that price tag, that is, I think, very clear what they're looking to do. There is, an argument to be made about why it is priced as high as it is, because, this goes back to like the presentation where, like, right before it went up, like, I wholeheartedly thought, yes, this thing is going to be a lot of money. And I said, like, oh, worst case scenario, $649 without a drive. I did not think we were going to get a console with a drive, because in theory that meant if, $649 is the console without a drive, then just don't offer a console with a drive at all, because that means the console with the drive is going to be touching the $699 price tag, and that's where optics are going to look really bad. But sure enough, it's $699 without that drive, and yeah, the optics are terrible because it is rightfully earned. The console is a lot of money. I mean, it's to the point where, in Europe, at €800 with a drive, and enthusiasts are probably going to want that drive, so that's another, $130 or something. And then if you, God forbid, want to orientate this thing vertically, I mean, yeah, you're looking at nearly $1,000 for a Pro mid-cycle console. It's a ton of money. We cannot overlook that. It's insane. It is to the point where I knew it would be a lot of money, but now you are very much really looking to find where that ceiling is. And you're probably going to price out people that even were expecting to pay a lot of money, and even they're the ones that are going to be sitting here going, yeah, I can't at that price, right? It's a lot of money. But I completely agree with what Ampere is saying as far as the rationale behind the price tag, which is really a twofold thing. Number one, yes, they are going unchecked. There is just no doubt at this point where the company is in a very sort of free position to, price things a lot higher. And it's not like everybody else has not been doing this, right? Again, there is still the much understood context of bill of materials are up, inflation is up, technology across the board. Everybody is dealing with this in a way where things just generally cost more money. But they are still in a position where they are unchecked from a direct competitor, and this is why I keep saying I want Microsoft to do well. I like traditional consoles. I like all consoles. I like all games. I want them to do well. I do not want us to be in this environment where Sony can start doing things like this. The console was going to be a lot, but it probably would have been maybe a little bit less money if, Microsoft was maybe doing a lot better, and they were also showing up with a mid-cycle update as well. So that's one aspect of it. The other angle is, and this is a very important thing with, discussing PS5 Pro, it is a mid-cycle console that most buyers don't actually need to go out and get, right? That doesn't necessarily excuse it, but it's a matter of they don't have to subsidize this console. And so that price tag, I think, is very reflective of them making like a very good margin on this thing. Like every PS5 Pro that gets sold is probably going to be a very healthy profit for them. it's not like a new console launch where the model almost always is. You're going to lose money on the box initially, have economies of scale come in, but also you're going to subsidize it with the eventual purchase per buyer of every person going out and buying multiple games and accessories, controllers, and that's how it offsets. That's how the console model has always worked, and it even still to this day has been like that with PlayStation 5. Now, in recent console generations, PS4 and PS5 turned a profit a lot faster than what we saw in prior generations. But with PlayStation 5, actually, as far as I know, the digital console was still losing money, and that's why that machine did see an MSRP price increase. But the point is, nowadays it's a lot different with bill of materials not going down, and so nobody can price down consoles by year 3, year 4, year 5. That's why this generation is very different, and that's why PS5 Pro is going to come in at a very high price tag. But it's to the point where, okay, that's going to be more than the base console, and it's now going to be even more than that to earn a profit on every console, because they don't necessarily have to subsidize it in a way where it's a new platform and you want people to get in the door and encourage buyers into this new ecosystem. And so that's why the other elephant in the room here is PlayStation 6. The concerning thing is, what does this mean for PlayStation 6? Because that console has to be better than PlayStation 5 Pro. But if PS5 Pro is priced at $700, and we know how this has been playing out, prices are not going down. So does that mean a new console cycle is going to start at possibly $700? That's a very concerning thing. Now, my hope here is that there's a few things working in favor of PS6 not being this crazy price tag. Now, it would probably still be very high, because we also have to bear in mind that's 3-4 years away from now. So yeah, it's going to be more money nowadays, but because it is going to be a new generation, they might have to go back to the subsidy model, which is, potentially eat cost initially to get buyers to jump in, buy multiple games, and subscribe to Plus and things like that. And there's also the other aspect of fabrication plants, where I think by 2028, 29, there should be a lot more options, hopefully really lighten the load on the entire technology sector, to where we might not have to see PlayStation 6 be an absurdly expensive box. But it's still a very alarming thing, because if console buyers, which are normally not used to this price range, if they get accustomed to that price tag, and Sony's looking to obviously make money, because why not, then they'll price the console at whatever they think they can get away with it, especially if Microsoft becomes more and more irrelevant in the high-end console space. So it's a very concerning thing. I would like to hope that they return to the subsidy model, especially because they subsidize in a way that is just far and above easier than what they saw during like PlayStation 3 and 2 even, or PS1. I mean, those consoles that was like actual retail sales, like, oh, we have to sell a number of games and controllers and things. It's like, the model surely looks different now. We know how much money you make from revenue on the PlayStation Store, right? Like microtransactions, DLC, subscription, MTX, all that stuff. You make so much more money during the PS4 and PS5 cycle that conceivably you can offer machines at a pretty low price. I don't want to say substantially low, but there's a subsidy model that exists nowadays that is a lot more conducive to offering perhaps lower entry price points than you could on PS1 through 3, I would argue. So this, it doesn't look good, I'll say that much, but PS5 Pro, at least in the here and now, is a very enthusiast console, priced very high, and I guess we'll have to wait and see how the market responds to it. But so far with the optics, they look very bad. Now, there is one aspect of this we can look at right now for gauging PS5 Pro interest, and that is the disk drive attachment that they're selling right now for PS5 Slim consoles, because that is going to work on PS5 Pro. And sure enough, that drive is selling out on third-party retailers. Last time I checked PS Direct, it is still available, but it does seem like by the time we had the PS5 Pro announcement, the disk drive was now selling in droves. So there are some people that are absolutely looking to prepare themselves for PlayStation 5 Pro. It's a very small key indicator, but still one that I think is worth pointing out. Now, we should also clarify that if you do want a PS5 Pro, then there is going to be 2 separate pre-order waves. So the first one is PS Direct only on September 26th. But if you do want a third-party retailer, that's going to be October 10th. So your GameStop, Walmart, Best Buy, Target, all that stuff. I think Amazon is going to be separate, so that might be a different date. But October 10th is going to be for all other retailers. So there is going to be 2 different waves to possibly secure a console. And if you do happen to live somewhere without PS Direct, then it's actually September 26th for all other retailers that are a participating third-party retailer for offering PlayStation hardware. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, pre-orders can be a kind of annoying, stressful thing if you are looking to grab this stuff, especially with bots and scalpers. So that's obviously going to be another very big issue with this console. I'm more than certain that will probably play out as well. So just keep in mind, if you are looking to get one of these things, September 26th for PS Direct, October 10th for third-party retailers. Now, we did just have a lot of very expensive news stories, so why not do an affordable one as well? PS5 refurbished consoles are coming soon to PlayStation Direct. That and also controllers as well, so it does seem like Sony is opening up this new refurbishment style program where you can buy PS5 consoles from Sony at a slight discount. I would actually say a very good discount. So digital consoles are $349 and disc is $399. Refurbished DualSense controllers are going to be available from $60 to $65 USD. And the consoles are CFI 1000 series models as well, which I would say is good and bad depending on which model you want to look at. Digital consoles, that means they cannot take on a disc drive. So if you buy that, it is always going to be digital. But if you buy a disc console, that is the OG model where the drive is, fixed onto the machine and it's always married to the motherboard. And so that console does not ever need to register the drive online, which that with the slim consoles is still a one-time thing generally, but it's something where the console will stay truly offline for the entirety of its life cycle, which is pretty cool. I will say, this is actually a very good deal. More so because they're also directly from Sony, as in you're going to get a warranty with them as well. You can always get PS5 consoles for around the $300-something range, but there's always value in getting them from Sony, having a receipt, and being able to have a warranty as well. Now, how long that warranty is, I don't know just yet. I'll probably double check and see if they did outline that, but still, having a warranty is better than not having one at all. And I guess it really depends on how well the refurbishment process actually is. Are these consoles really cleaned up? Do they look good? You would expect that from Sony. But if they do turn out okay, then this is a very viable way to end up buying a base console. So this, I think, is actually great to see, and in this environment where things are as expensive as they are. Next up, we have another rumor for the upcoming State of Play presentation that we're all expecting, which at this point, it's more or less just clarifying exactly when we can expect this show to actually happen. So this comes from Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb, where he says on a recent Game Mess Decides episode that the State of Play should be showing up in around 12 days, now 11, which would line this thing up to be around September 24th, which would be a Tuesday, I believe. So the expectation probably is they'll announce on Monday, then the show goes up the following day. Monday they do also, and they do this with every single State of Play, but they've always been very good on outlining exactly what's going to be in that show. So saying it's from third-party partners or PSVR2 games, or hey, PS Studios is going to be here or they're not going to be here. So at least by Monday, we probably will know what we are walking into, which, we already heard it was the last week of September anyway, and that already narrowed it down based on the 3-day window because TGS was starting on the 26th. So yeah, it seems more and more clear the State of Play is coming, and now it's a matter of what is it going to be, and sentiment has been unsurprisingly very low at this point in the game. It's been a very turbulent few months for PlayStation, right? Or at least the past month and a half or so, where it's like, Concord, it's so over, then Astro Bot, we're so back, PS5 Pro, it's so over, and now we have State of Play where I think walking into that, it's already kind of low because it is a State of Play, and that's the expectation thing. But, it's as I've said before, the showcase moniker is just maybe something we should maybe abandon at this point, because with State of Play, we had some that were actually better than the 2023 showcase, right? So it's like just stick to State of Play, always outline what's going to be in here like a direct, never change the language unless it's something really big and pertinent like new PlayStation hardware, and just kind of do that where it's always something where, the State of Plays can run a gamut. They can be singular presentations on one game, they can be PSVR 2 focused, indies or, of course, PS studios as well. And we are absolutely getting to that point where we should be seeing something from PlayStation Studio partners. Although I do want to stress, again, it's my understanding that a lot of the studios are just in this position where they don't want to say things unless they feel a little bit confident about a release window. That's why 2025, I mean, there are going to be some big marquee games coming after, let's say, around April, March, because that's the metric that we have for major sequels to existing IP. But, you know, they probably want to try and announce and release within a tighter window, which was something we did see in a way early on with the initial cycle when this console kicked off. So I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but it's a matter of we have a state of play coming very soon. Hopefully it does deliver. I'm not going to be super optimistic, but I think we will possibly see at least one or two things that are, I think, a little bit encouraging, and will probably reinvigorate the audience a little bit for some exciting content. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And we had the PS5 Pro reactions discussion on Tuesday, right when it happened. And then yesterday, if you saw, we did the typical PS5 update video where it's pretty short, but it goes over every single changelog item, showing you exactly what was in that new firmware. And then, yeah, coming up is definitely going to be my Astro Bot playthrough, still working through all that footage. It's definitely going to be more of a supercut, not like a proper Let's Play, but it's going to be long, probably an hour, 2 hours, I don't know. I'm still working through it, but you'll probably get that. I just don't know when, and then probably something else with it as well. So if that doesn't show up by Tuesday, maybe something else will show up in its place, maybe Astro Bot Wednesday or something, I don't know. But yeah, you'll definitely see my reactions and big moments to the entire game, similar to Astro's Playroom, which was it was a very fun game, so you'll see all that. But that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.